Welcome to the Try series presented by Zwift. This is the second installment of this weekly series, and this time we are taking the field of all-star female pro triathletes into London and up the famed Box Hill. Once isn't going to be enough, as we're going to make these riders reach the summit of the climb twice, finishing on their second journey up. The series was designed to give the pros a fun place to reconnect and get a good hard effort in, and no doubt they'll be getting it this week out in London. Definitely one of the harder courses out here in Zwift, and definitely going to have their work cut out for them here today. We're going to be, I don't know, I'm pretty excited to watch this race go down. And as we said, we've got a ton of super talented female pros that are going to be out here in our first race of the day. And they now have 6 minutes till they're going to hit the start as we roll through the beautiful countryside of London before the race begins. I'm Matt Lieto, and with me for this week is Sean Jefferson. How's it going, Sean? You excited to be?
I'm really excited for this week. It's a lovely course. I did a little course recon yesterday, went up Box Hill, and ready for these women to get started. It's going to be a lot of fun today.
Yeah, and I think this London Loop is a pretty popular course. I know it's one that I ride frequently up and down. Sometimes I feel like Watopia is where I want to be, and sometimes it's London, and London is definitely stretch the legs up the climbs. The race format here for today, as I said, we're in London doing the loop, 1.5 laps, which you look at kind of where Box Hill is placed, that means they're gonna have to go up that twice, getting almost 400 meters of climbing in for the day's effort. And Sean, I know you've ridden up this climb a few times. How stoked are you not to have to race up this twice this morning?
Yeah, it's not the hardest climb in Zwift, but it's going to be a really hard 6 to 7 minute power effort each time up Box Hill. So these athletes will have to face some really intense segments on this course today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's not the toughest climb at all, for sure. But in a race format, when especially triathletes are known for, if they're short races, we got some ITU athletes that are really good at that short, hard effort. But generally, a 6-minute effort is on the short side for professional triathletes. So for me, certainly nothing that I would choose, but it's definitely going to be a painful couple journeys up Box Hill this morning. And there it is, the nice scene. What's your favorite section of Box Hill?
The finish line.
Finish.
It definitely, the way the hill's laid out is it's kind of punchy, kind of straight away, 6, 7, 8% for the first third of their climb, then flattens out a little, like down to 4 to 5% through the remainder of the climb, with a little bit of kicks at 6%, but then right at the finish it'll flatten out. So these riders and racers today will really kind of be able to sprint over the top on this and hit that flat section towards the end. So it's definitely going to be an exciting 6 to 7 minutes up that hill for the finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got quite a field of women to watch coming into the race here with just a few minutes to go. Definitely no shortage of talented athletes. Athletes that we saw out last week on the hit out are back, as well as some new ones as well. Who do you have your eyes on, Sean? We got a list up here now for you.
Yeah, so Lucy Charles is back. Flora, who won last week, is back. Cassandra Beaugrand, who's a rising IT star talent, is racing, I believe, her first race, but maybe she's done some other cycling races on Zwift. Emma Palland, who raced really well last year. Lauren Brandon, who it's her first time today racing on Zwift. And Annabelle Luxford from Australia is in the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great field. Just those 6 there, obviously, out there as well, that we'll get to kind of once we get rolling. But it's what's cool about this series to me, Sean, is like Lauren Brandon, super accomplished professional triathlete, obviously won some great races in the last few years, but she was just as nervous as she'd be for any other race. She was we're good buddies. She was texting me last night trying to get all the beta. So this definitely is something that these athletes are doing for fun, but they certainly take it seriously. You kind of can't take away that competitive nature, right?
Yeah, I think the athletes that have never raced on Zwift get even more nervous because there's that unknown. They don't know what to expect. If they're lining up for their an Ironman or half Ironman, they kind of got the feeling they know what they're up for. On Zwift, it's a complete unknown, especially when it's your first Zwift race. So I can imagine how these athletes coming into Zwift for the first time would be pretty nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, if you haven't raced, you don't know, Sean, what do you think are the biggest things to look out for on power-ups here on our first race?
Yeah, so this is one of the interesting things with Zwift is the power-ups that are available. They can make or break your race here. You can see the power-ups that are available to all the riders. So the way these work is when you cross a kind of a loop banner or a KOM or sprint banner, you will receive one of these 5 power-ups.
Yep.
It's random. You don't get to pick which one you want. Each time you go through, it's a random order, and you can get one of these power-ups and use them when you want. So not every athlete will get the same power-up. You'll get a different one every time you go through one of the banners, and you have to use them strategically as you're racing through today's course.
There you go. And with 1 second to go, we are in the start. Is riding in her BMC kit, her sponsor's kit, and she is in that front 10. And one of those there's a lot that's very different about Zwift racing than these athletes have done before. The power-ups obviously was a great one to point out, but the start is different too, right? And I think, Sean, I feel like a few athletes got kind of caught out. What's so important about the start in a Zwift race?
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you're not familiar with how Zwift racing works, you need to be up to power before the banner drops. It's kind of like in video games when you're playing Mario Kart. You don't want to start revving it up right at the start. It should be a second or two before and really get the high power up and going. So once you get onto the course, you're already moving and flying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was telling had a few people reach out after last week. Again, I think we had some they said, oh, I'm planning on starting out hard. I'm like, start out twice as hard as you were planning on starting out. And that way, you're not going to miss that front group, because I think what's so important about that is that, yeah, you want to be near the actual front of the race, but if there's separations in a large group, it's pretty hard to bring those back, right, Sean?
Yeah, the way Zwift works is very much like outside. It's those packs get off the front. They're really hard to bring back, and they take a lot of work to do it. So we'll see. You'll see during the race, you definitely don't want any gaps open. You want to keep it together, even if that means like going all in to just hang on to a pack. If you get dropped, it's not going to be an easy way to get back.
No, it's no easy feat to get back out there. And right now we see, clearly it is hard. Emma pushing 5.7 watts per kilo as she is making sure she's staying in this front group early in the race. Flora Duffy is in that group as well. Ramsey is in that group, as well as Lucy Charles Barclay. Who do you who on this list here in this top 10 do you expect something out of later today?
I went with Lucy last week, but it's hard to go against Flora after seeing what she did on the course last week in one of her first races on Zwift. She's just tactically very good. Sky Munch should be a good one. I know she's done some racing this year virtually, so we'll see how she goes. But a lot of the new riders and new racers, I do think there's a learning curve. So I do like to see the experienced riders going. But again, Flora kind of broke that mold last week. So I think it is up to anyone's race. It's gonna be the best rider up that hilltop finish today. He's gonna take the title.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. You know, it's hard because I think you can have some really good riders that maybe get caught out on their first time and maybe miss that front group. But in the end, the best rider on the day does win. And for Duffy showed that last spite of she was asking after the race what power ups were, and most Zwift racers are definitely focused on the power ups. So I bet she
Yeah, like yeah, kind of like I said before, the power, I wouldn't say they make or break your race. They definitely have a it's an advantage to use them at the right time. They really come into play at the end with a sprint. And this race being a uphill finish, you'll really want to see athletes save those feather power ups for the final climb. When we were talking before about having only one power up at a time, and if you get a featherweight early, being able to save it for the end is key. But again, if you need to use a power up to stay in the pack, by all means, you better use it, because if you get dropped, it's going to be super hard to get back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome. The thing I think people underestimate, because just racing and Zwift is very much different, and especially these athletes that are super strong and kind of time trialists, they think, oh, you know what, this feels really hard. We're going over acceleration's a little hard. I'm going to give them 3 meters or 5 meters, and then I'll just slowly bring it back. That is not something that happens in Zwift. You really can't work against the group like that. So I think it's important for those athletes to remember, so that oftentimes, Sean, yes, the end of the race, the finish banner is the end of the race. But if you feel like you're going to get dropped at all, you need to act like that's your last card you're ever going to play, right?
Yeah, your race theoretically will end if you get dropped from the first pack today. I think a lot of this group will stay together for the first 4 miles of this race, until they hit the bottom of Box Hill, and then we'll see some separation start to happen. This course is relatively flat for the first part as we're riding through central London. We'll cross over a bridge and then go through the tube, and then we'll kind of start Box Hill. So you definitely don't want to see a split before, and it looks like there's some gaps kind of opening on the back here with Sophie Caldwell sitting on the back of this pack right now.
Yeah, no, and she definitely kind of exactly what we're play all of her cards right now to make sure she doesn't get dropped off of this group. As you see all these little small little gaps, and as we look now at a group that's chasing, and if there is a time where kind of what I just said isn't true, where you might be able to get back, it is on a course that has undulations and then flat sections in between, where you might be able to get a large group together. You're never going to catch the front group, but you might catch some of these athletes that are just getting blown up the second time at Box Hill. So I think we will see kind of this group dynamic be a little bit more important on this race than the last one. But we can see already people are scrambling trying to catch that front of that group with those powerhouses. Look at Emma Pallant was pushing out huge watts, obviously, as was Lucy Charles Barclay too. So we see this group riding pretty hard together.
Yeah, and we just came off a little rise in the road. It's nothing too crazy, but it was the one little bump we had in this first flat section. So I don't know if that's what caught some people off guard and opened up a little gap. It looks like the chase is on for a lot of these. Like Annabelle Luxford is making a move here to try to close down. I believe she's looks like she's a little bit in no man's land there.
Yeah, and that's no, it's not a good place to be, and it's going to be a hard ask to make it up to this front group. Certainly solo. If you had some help, take a turn when you flick your elbow, maybe you'd have it. It's going to be a tough one for her, and that, as we said, is kind of the learning curve on racing on Zwift. But right now we're kind of in this front group. We've got Kretz in there. It looks like Nath is in there as well. She is undoubtedly a powerhouse on the bike. Sky Monch, as you pointed out earlier. So definitely strong field that is pushing that pace, and the hard stuff hasn't even started yet, Sean.
Yeah, and this is one of the gamification pieces of Zwift. We've come out of central London, we've taken the tube, and we've thrown some plywood boards down on the track. So they're riding through the tube right now, and they're going to pop out, and Box Hill is going to be right around the corner. So it's one of those cool things we can do in Zwift to gamify a map like London and bring a climb like Box Hill much closer to the city center. So here we go. We're just exiting the tube, coming into the start of Box Hill. Will be up here around the corner. There's a little bit of a roundabout, and then we'll kind of start kicking up towards Box Hill coming up in a second.
Yeah, and I think Box Hill, it's wise for those athletes to try to pace themselves as much as they can. I think, the first athlete to burn a big match and attack, in the first minute of this longer climb is probably going to get spit out the back, or they're going to be feeling it by the time they get to the top. So you kind of essentially want to be looking over your shoulder just to make sure you're there. You're not in the last few at the back of the group, but you're kind of comfortably in there, and you're virtually sizing everybody up on this climb.
Yeah, no, we've gone through the banner for the KOM. So this is officially the start of Box Hill, and you see it's up to 7% very quickly. And it'll be 6-7% for the first third of this climb before it levels out a little bit, and they kind of sustain that 5% through the rest of the climb. But yeah, we definitely want to watch for any breaks here. It looks like it's stringing out a bit up front. It looks like a BMC rider on the front right now. Ruth Astle up there, Lucy Charles up there. They're definitely pushing hard right now, and this is where this is going to be a make or break situation for a lot of these athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at that awesome shot from the side view. It looks like even from this front group with Lucy Charles Barkley there, I believe Emma Plant is in there as well. Right now, that gap is, 4 or 5 meters, a couple bike lengths, but then we've got a group of about 20 athletes that is, kind of that now a chase group. It looks like they're bringing it back together, but there's an athlete on the front that is pushing the pace, does not want that group to come back together as it looks like it does, but single file, definitely not a lot of room for things to expand beyond that. And that's that BMC kid again. So I believe it's Emma Plant that is pushing the pace at the front of this race course.
Yeah, it does look like that. And you can see there's a group of 5 or 6 kind of behind chasing, and then another group of maybe 8 to 10 a little bit further back, but they're all relatively close right now. And it's I don't even know if they're not quite halfway up yet. So it's going to be a dogfight all the way to the top.
Sure is. And this is an awesome shot. That's Emma Plant, right side of the screen there as well. And it looks like it almost looks like I saw a smile.
There you see she's dropped the power burrito. That makes her undraftable for 10 seconds. A little bit of strategy here. It's also one of those things she's holding on to the power burrito up the hill. It's one of the ones you want to get away from. You want to shed it before you could come over the top of the KOM banner, so you can then replenish that with a new power up. That's one of the tricks here. If you're holding on to a power up like the burrito or a draft on a hilltop finish, you want to get rid of it so you can potentially get a featherweight or a arrow helmet at the top of this climb.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's tactics right there. You don't want to you're not getting that much help with the burrito. I mean, Emma probably knows that, Lucy Charles Barkley isn't getting a huge draft on this steep of a climb anyways. So, she uses it, but she's going to get another one here in just a few seconds as we see Lucy Charles Barkley on there. And it does look like they've settled in. I don't know if you can call 5 watts per kilo settling in, but on this short of a climb, I think these athletes could be going a little bit harder. Not to say they're not going super hard, but they're definitely kind of looking around, because the reality is they have separated a little bit. They've got a second gap to Caldwell, Finlay is in there, and then a bigger gap to Van Heerden, Herring, and Thek. So that gap could maintain. You could keep that open, but in the end, it doesn't really matter if they drop everybody now. You've got to go up this climb a second time, so you don't want to burn your big matches the first time up Hill.
Yeah, and we see a lot of the racers who were in the top 10 last week already back to the top 10. Emma Pallant, Lucy Charles, Flora Duffy already up there. Paula Finley is coming up. She's moved into the top 10, into 7th. And we've got 2 of our former ZA Tri Academy athletes still in the top 10, which which goes to show that there is experience playing into this race. Knowing the hill, knowing when to attack and for how long, it will be important here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Those two athletes are certainly strong cyclists, but having that knowledge of knowing when it's going to really push everything into staying in that front group, knowing that they're going to be able to recover on this descent, be able to coast a little bit, and that group will stay together. And then, the group's going to theoretically decide if they're going to try to stay away from what looks to be a chase group with a few athletes not too far behind. So the race is definitely blowing up. To me, it looks like Emma Plant was going pretty hard up that first climb. I hope she saves a little bit for the second time up Box Hill for her sake, because Lucy Charles Barclay definitely, she has that experience that you spoke of on racing on Zwift as well.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that gap go up a little more. The top 7 and Ruth is right at the back. She needs to hang in here, try to keep it close, get over the top of this climb, and then recover. Then you see an 8-second gap back to 8th, 9th, and 10th, Jackie Herring and Van Heerden. So Ruth needs to stay tough here. She's got a 2-second gap off Flora, so she needs to really push, and you can see her there. There's a little bit of a gap there. You want to close that down by the time we get to the top here and then descend with all these girls.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's important is, often, riders that are very aerodynamic or maybe a little, I'm going to give them 5 seconds over the top of this climb, and I know I'll be able to, that way I don't have to work quite as hard, save some for the last time at Box Hill. But that is not really an option here. Tell us a little bit about why that group is, especially on descent, is so hard to keep up with or try to bring back.
Yeah, when you're in a pack and you just can take those turns at the front, someone can hold 5.5 watts per kilogram and everyone else can draft in. If you're stuck by yourself, you've got to do all the power, all the braking, the air braking of the wind, kind of taking it all by yourself on the front. We just saw Ruth use the Ghost power up. She's just likely getting rid of that while the KOM comes up here, and they're just about to come up here. It's flattening out a bit. They should be coming around to the KOM, and there's a group with Paula's a little bit off the back too. 3 seconds, and you see the banner right there.
Yeah, there we go. They're going. That's their first time up Box Hill, and that was great to see that, giving that effort, because she knows that everything that we're saying, she'd be ignoring us, but she is making sure she gets onto that back of that group before the descent.
So this is a really interesting point. We just came across the top. There is actually another 100-meter kind of punch before we start the descent. But a lot of these athletes just refreshed with power-ups, and we'll see if anyone starts using them to try to catch back on before we start descending here.
Yeah, and looking at this,
they're definitely opening.
Oh yeah, what we were just talking about. We had Ruth ask. She was just barely off the back of the group. She's already. Herring is 40 seconds back, so those gaps are huge. Those aren't coming back. Most likely be able to get back to the front of this group, and now it's a question of, do Lucy Charles Barclay and Emma Plant really want to just go away by themselves? I'd imagine they'd want that kind of horsepower with Caldwell and Duffy, but maybe not. Maybe they want to get rid of them early and time trial across the flatter sections of this course so they can ride this climb kind of at their own pace.
Yeah, I would suspect Lucy Charles and Emma Plant want to get Duffy out of this pack, try to stay away and make it a kind of a 2-on-3 or 3-versus-3 race here. And they're doing a great job. They're really powered over the top here. Now they're finally on the descent, and we'll have a couple minutes here to kind of recover a little bit. But the race is still on down this descent. But you can see the gap up to 11 seconds back to Flora right now. Amelia Crest, 15 seconds. Paula Finley, 20 seconds. So the gaps are really starting to open, especially if you're stuck by yourself.
Yeah, it's huge. Caldwell now 12, Duffy 15, 16 seconds. Those two athletes will probably try to get themselves together. And what's cool about this compared to a normal or a flatter Zwift course where you might have it's basically you're always going to be in that front group. If you're not in that front group, you're done. Is when you finish with a finish climb like this, we might end up in a situation where we see Lucy Charles Barclay, Emma Plant as a 2 women time trial team versus a Caldwell and a Duffy as a 2-women time trial team. And if those gaps stay similar, then it becomes who can do this climb the fastest, right? So there is a possibility for someone that's not in that front group of 2 to still win this race if they keep it tight enough.
Definitely. I mean, we'll see if Caldwell, Duffy, Kretz, and Finley can all get together. It's a 20-second gap between them, so it is quite spread out still. One of the things we see here that is a little bit of a trick in Zwift is, which none of the women up front, Lucy or Colin, are using, is the super. It's a little bit one of those. It's one of those hidden tricks in Zwift that they could be using right now, but they're kind of full gap down this hill. And just so I go into a little bit of the super and how to do it is whenever you're on a descent and you're over 36 miles an hour and a -3, like a -3 incline, if you stop pedaling for a second or two, once your power goes under 11 watts, your avatar will go into a super tuck, and that can hold relatively the same pace as someone who's riding, I think, 2.5 to 3 watts per kilogram. So it's definitely useful on this descent. No one used it. I wonder if any of the women behind used it, but I wonder if any of them even know about it. It's one of those tricks in Zwift that you can use on some of these longer descents, especially this one. You could get a couple minutes rest before hitting this flat section.
Yeah, that was one that was going around in kind of the text threads this week where people figured that out. They were kind of ticked off. They didn't know about it. There's a big difference between coasting or spinning, coasting very easily, getting that heart rate down versus pushing out these 5 watts per kilo, 6.5 watts per kilo. We see Lucy Charles Barkley going up this steep kicker as we cruise through London. But it's that's definitely one that can help save that energy. And Caldwell seems like she's bringing it back. She's burning some matches. She got within 6 seconds. Now she's back at 9 seconds as these athletes are on a faster section of road. But what do you think? What do you think Caldwell's time trial chances are of getting back up to these 2?
I think it's going to be a little slim with Palin and Charles going back and forth at the front here. It looks like they're kind of grouping up together, going to work together here to try to keep that gap growing instead of closing down. And it's already started. 13 seconds back to Caldwell, Duffy 38, Kretz 41. So I think we are going to see a second pack form. It looks like there is a bunch of girls packing up here back at the 47-second mark. So we'll see if they can close down any time before the start of the next hill, and it's going to be super important, or Colin and Charles are just going to go 1 and 2 up the next hill.
Yeah, I think you're right at all. And so with that big of a group, do you think 50 seconds? That's a lot to bring back. Do you think the power in numbers on a course like this is advantageous enough that they might be able to bring back these 2 athletes that are pushing out near 5 watts per kilo?
I think it's going to be really hard, and the group will have to work really, really well together, probably using their power-ups to even try to make up some of the time on the flat. So if some of these women get the aero power-up, a drafting power-up, and they really work hard on the flat, they could bring back some. 40 seconds is a lot. I'm not sure they're going to be able to make up that time before the next hill starts.
No, I agree with you there. And the hard, I kind of feel for Caldwell. She's in what we call no women's land. She's groups 22 seconds from the front, 22 seconds from the group behind, and she's just in a solo TT effort. And there's nobody there to help her. And then at the end of TT effort to the bottom of Box Hill, she needs to try to get up it as quickly as possible and to keep that group that's been able to kind of save energy by working together to keep them from taking that podium spot away from them.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Is she have a better shot of sitting up and resting a little bit here, getting caught up by the second group, and then really making a strong attack up the hill for the finish? Or does she try to kind of maintain here? The gap's not changing too much. It's hovering around 20 seconds. Would she like that 20-second gap at the start of the hill and think she can just hold them off all the way to the top? There she is.
Yeah, she's cruising through now. She's time trial mode for sure, and she's only lost 2 more seconds to those athletes up front, and which I think is pretty good show for someone working against two athletes working together. But she looks comfortable. It's not like looks like she's totally cracking herself to hold that pace. She's settled in. You can see she, just the way kind of she's holding herself. She's under control. So I think it doesn't look like she's totally burning her matches. Maybe she is now. It looks like that gap is getting bigger. I wonder, do you think she's holding up and looking over her shoulder for that group behind? It doesn't want to waste that energy on her own.
It looks like she was riding steady for a second there, and then she put in a little effort. But yeah, she's holding between 4 watts per kilogram, and now she's back down to 2. While the women behind her, Flora, is at 4.7 up to 5. I saw on the front. So it's a mix. And they kind of go back and forth between being steady, riding just a steady conservative power, 4 watts per kilogram. Where, I mean, doesn't look like a big chase from the group behind right now.
No, it doesn't. I wonder though if Sophie, she just did a race yesterday, so maybe she has some tired legs. I mean, clearly, she has the top end effort to be able to do well on that climb. So I would almost wonder if you sat up a little bit, stretch the legs, get in that second group, and then give yourself effort to finish. But she knows herself a lot better than I do for sure. But so right now she still has 17 seconds over that chase group. But on screen right now we've got Emma Pallant and Lucy Charles Barclay, kind of team time trial, trying to stay away from these athletes chasing.
Yeah, and it does look like the chase group is going to probably pick up Caldwell before the climb. I think it's down to about 12, 13 seconds right now. And they are making up some time on this flat section too, the leaders of Lucy Charles and Emma Pallant. So they're moving really well. See that big group can cut off a lot of this time before the climb. I think this gap is too big before they start the climb to actually play into it. I think the winner is going to come from either Emma Pallant or Lucy Charles.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think even if that group was to catch, they've been pushing hard to, while Lucy Charles Barclay and Emma Pallant are kind of just looking at each other, right? But makes it exciting, and that chase doing some good work. Is there anybody you're surprised not to see in this chase group or this front group early on?
Paula Finley was up there. I don't see her name in the top 10. I would have expected her to be in the mix. She had a great race last week. I'm not sure if maybe she's in the 15th, 16th position and she's on the back of this group, but she would be one I would expect to be up there. But I think we got a lot of the top names from last week are back and in the mix here.
Yeah, and athletes that are super talented cyclists that we don't see in this front we've got Sky Mach is out there, Kelsey Withrow as well, both super strong cyclists. And that one that we spoke of that is a hammer on the bike and almost exclusively rides indoors, Lauren Brandon, she's nowhere to be seen at this point. So she could be in that chase group, or she could be time trialing kind of on her own across. But there's definitely some super talented athletes that we're not seeing on this leaderboard, and that's just because this field is so deep.
Yeah, and so we're down to 40 seconds now. A little bit of time is being made up. I would like to see that second group around 20 seconds if anybody would have a shot up Box Hill. I mean, if you think Lucy Charles and Emma Pallant are working really hard on the front to stay off the front, maybe it dampens their legs a little bit on the second time up the hill, and it could open the door for someone like Flora Duffy or
Totally.
I think she was kind of the strongest of the group, other than Lucy Charles and Emma Pallant up the hill the first time. So I'd like to see that group pull them back to maybe 20, 25 seconds to give her a shot. But at this point, it's kind of maintaining in that 40 to 50 second range.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's not likely that it's going to come back, but I'd love there as well. But and it's one of those things that and your goals might change. Like Flora Duffy won last week, and then first time at Box Hill, when she realizes these two women are are riding away, she's now like, okay, well, there's 1 and 2. I'm not clearly there on another level. I'm not going to get there. How do I make sure I get third? Right. So now she, those athletes adapt, and Caldwell maybe kind of the same thing. She dropped back to this group and she's like, okay, I got to save up my energy to try to get third place, because in reality, the way Emma Plant rides a bike and the way Lucy Charles rides the bike, if you don't have if you're not within 15 or 20 seconds and on your best legs ever, you're not going to bring those two down.
Yeah, and then it will come down to, I mean, you can get a little bit of an advantage if, say, Flora or Ruth or Caldwell has a featherweight power up. I mean, it's only a 10-second bump, but if Emma Pallant and Lucy don't have the a power up that'll give them any advantage, you can get a little bit different 5-6 seconds. But yeah, I think at this point it's a race between these two for the title, and then it's going to be an exciting race for third.
No, absolutely. And again, that group is probably a little bit bigger than what we're showing cycling through in that second group. Maybe we can get a shot of that second group as well. But definitely some work to be done, but certainly a good race to be had from that second group, whether or not they can push up to try to get that, to get a little bit closer, or maybe to get that one.
Yeah, and it seems like the gap's been pretty consistent, around a minute, down to, I think, the closest north, and stays pretty consistent. I think you get a little bit of the uphills, a little bit of the downhills where the gap shortens and then it expands back out. So once we go through the tube and get out to Box Hill, we'll get a better idea of the gap and see where they're at. And they're getting close now, so let's see where they're at.
Yeah, there we go. They are coming up to the hill. Definitely. Let's see. I mean, okay, now this is easy for us to pick. We got two athletes. Who you pick? Who's going to do it?
I picked wrong last week when I went with Lucy Charles. Emma Pallant is using her Aero helmet now. I'm going to go with Emma Pallant here. She looked really strong in the first time up. She's been aggressive and she's attacking now, and they've just officially started the hill.
There you go. That's it. And I'm going to take the opposite because, but I might take Lucy Charles. She's certainly ridden this course a lot. But,
at least one of us will be right.
Yeah, that doesn't always happen. So good work there. But they're swapping turns right now. I think they're going to be looking at each other. But so if you've feel like you've been equally matched with someone you've been riding around this course with for about 30 minutes, where, if you're feeling good, where do you make your move on?
I mean, I think it's going to be just at the very end on this course. It does flatten out, so it's not as advantageous to kind of make an attack early and just hold. Where it does get to be 1%, 2%, 3%, if any of these women can hang on to the very end and then kind of kick right over the top, I think that's where the advantage is going to be. We haven't seen Lucy use a power up, I don't believe, unless she used it earlier on. But Emma Pallant used her power up. So if Lucy is sitting on a featherweight power up, she may be waiting to use that, or even if she's got an Aero power up, she could use that right at the top and try to gain that advantage as a sprint finish.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call, and we're just waiting like everybody else, see who makes that first. I think Lucy Charles Barclay is pretty confident, but no doubt the effort that Emma Pallant has been putting in so far today. So, I expect to see Lucy Charles Barclay kind of do that first big move. But kind of like you said, Sean, Emma Pallant seemed like she had control over the entire group the first time up this climb. And she's a smart racer, so she certainly saved something for the second lap.
Yeah, she's been aggressive on this hill, and she's being aggressive now. We do see the gap coming down a little bit to the riders behind, 23 seconds back to Flora. I still think it's way too much to make up, and it looks like she's kind of gone off on her own there. Although it does show a gap of only 1 second behind and 2 seconds behind back to Caldwell. So it looks like Flora's kind of attacking this on her own, trying to bridge up. I just 27 seconds with halfway up the climb. It's just not going to be enough. We got 2K to go here.
Yeah, no, there's not much room left to make it up. If she had the legs, she'd try to get away from this group. I don't envision Ruth Assel or Sophie Caldwell letting Flora go. They definitely want to do their best to hang in there, and they did a great job on that first climb. Probably had better climbs the first time up Box Hill than Flora Duffy did, but the last time up is the one that counts. So as we see Thek close the gap and ride up alongside Flora Duffy.
Yeah, and you see a lot of the women are holding at just over 5 watts per kilogram up this climb. Some Caldwell up to 5.7. You see some spikes of the women trying to stay attached. It'd be nice to see kind of, it looks like 28 seconds back to 30 seconds. So we still have a pretty good group all following Flora up this climb.
Yeah, no, big group for sure. And, those gaps have come down up that climb. It's, a little bit closer, but I don't see there being much chance of this chase group bringing back those front 2 women. But cool overhead shot of these 4 women in this chase group. It looks like Caldwell, Assel, Thek, and Duffy have separated just a little bit from Jackie Herring and Moore and Zelinka. So right now it does look like, as we speak, maybe Caldwell, she was off for a second, but she's right back on. So back to the front of the group, Lucy Charles Barclay looking casual in that hat, not casual how she's putting that power down on the pedals. I think she's trying to ramp up right now. She's trying to get a little bit of a gap. There she goes, at 6.6 watts per opening.
Yeah, she's definitely putting the power down, seeing if she can get away from Paulin here. Paulin is still holding tough, 5.7 watts per kilogram. She's trying not to let her get away. It's going to be, the gap is opening though. It looks like 1 second now, and Lucy is still at 6.4 watts per kilogram. So she might be riding away with this.
Yeah, I think that that gap, that elastic, I believe, has snapped. Hard to see. Emma still pushing 5.5 watts per kilo up this climb, but 1K to go, and Lucy Charles Barclay now has 3 seconds, and it's going to finish on the climb, so no time to settle in and try to bring that back. It's going to be who has the most watts per kilo coming up the end of this climb, and Lucy Charles Barclay, camera on the right, doesn't seem like she's showing any signs of weakness, Sean.
Yeah, she's got her head down. She's steady, pushing really strong power here. 6.4 watts per kilogram down to 6 watts per kilogram, and looking like she's maintaining composure. She knows what she has to do. She's got 700 meters to go. She knows this climb like the back of her hand, so she's just ready and prepared to smash it out to the finish here. 600 meters to go, and it looks like that gap is just going the wrong way for Emma Paulin.
Yeah, it is not. It's not going the right way. That's too many matches the first time up the climb, or maybe keeping up with Lucy Charles Barclay kind of in between the climbs is what did it. Or, like we said, experience is something. Lucy Charles Barclay spends a ton of time on Zwift, and it's something she has a ton of experience with. She throws aerodynamic advantage on just at the end here, as she now has close to 10 seconds, as it's just a 2% grade, back up to 3 as we roll to the end of this climb up Box Hill.
Yeah, she's timing that power up to perfection. She knew the hill was gonna slope down a little bit to 2%, 1%, and that's where she used it. She didn't use it at the steepest part of the climb, which would be not to her advantage. And it looks like she's gonna cross the finish line here with a pretty good gap back to Paulin.
Yeah, she is. She's and now it's open up. It's one of those things. If you're now 20 seconds back, you're not going to be able to Lucy Charles Barclay, but she doesn't give up. She's at 5.5 watts per kilo as she comes through and goes under the banner as well. And it looks like Potter has separated,
making a big move.
Yeah, so she's kind of following and watching. And when stuff got hard, she didn't put her nose out in the wind until it mattered, and she's gotten herself in that third place position.
Yeah, and pretty cleanly too. She's got a 10-second gap back to fourth, and Flora's all the way back at fifth, 30 seconds back, so 20 seconds back. So there's your top three over the top, and here's the racing continues. Astle, Coldwell sprinting to the finish line here.
Oh, there you go. Nothing you want at the end of Box Hill is sprinting across for fourth and fifth place. But great effort for those women here as we see Jackie Herring coming across the finish line. Flora Duffy went through there already as well, as did Morier and Potter. It looks like we have Thek coming across third. Zelinka still rolling through here. We'll get kind of that leaderboard up here, and we're going to get our results up and then on to the men's event. But here we go. Natasha Van Heerden, one of our Zwift Tri team members from last year, coming across the finish line. I think a great by Van Heerden. And there's the results, Sean. What do you think?
Well, I think you called Lucy this time, and I called Emma, so I'm wrong both weeks. But yeah, you see a lot of the same names up here. Caldwell in the top five. Nice to see Ruth Astle up there in fourth. Flora drops down to sixth this week. She's been doing a lot of virtual racing recently, so interesting to see these names switch every week depending on the course profile.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's going to continue to happen. We're going to the cream rise to the top. Obviously, kind of regardless of what the course is like. Lucy Charles Barkley. I think the players are going to change kind of how we set these courses up every week and how the race is. And here we go, right into the men's race. Perfect timing. We have a star-studded field, just like we did for the women's event, with the Brownlee brothers at the top of that list. Anthony Costa's second place last week, with Lionel Sanders back here. Bart Ano for his first race here in the Z Pro Tri Series. And, he's one that has some great horsepower in those legs, one of the best bike runners in the sport. And Ben Canute, super talented American over multiple distances. So he's certainly the horsepower to be able to keep up. And let's get back to the race and see if it's blown apart already, because this is a huge men's field. Sean, tell us why that makes it a little bit harder when you've got 100 plus people on that start line.
Yeah, this is a huge field, and on this flat section to start is going to be really fast up front. The biggest problem is seeing when those gaps open. If you're in the back and you need to move up and you don't see where those splits happen, you can get caught out pretty early here and get some separation between these groups. So really important to be up there early, get up there towards the front early, and kind of just stay present and watch for any particular gaps to open. But I imagine it's going to be pretty packed for this first couple miles, and then we'll see the kind of in the women's race, we'll see some bumps and splits happen once we start hitting the hill.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny, people might be asking what's going on in the burritos, power ups being used immediately. Tell us maybe happening early in this race. Some gentlemen maybe not stoked with what their first power up was.
Yeah, they're probably not happy they got the burrito and wish they would have got a arrow helmet or a featherweight. So they're kind of just discarding them, or they're just in the pack and they don't want the person behind them to get a little bit extra draft. So use the burrito now, kind of make it harder for the rider behind them while the pace is really hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of as we touched on in the women's race, but for those just joining us for this men's race series, this is our second and this one we're going to be going through London and up Box Hill twice. So this, we always have very hard starts that in Zwift racing that a lot of pros can underestimate, and there certainly were some that underestimated the last week. But what makes this race so brutal is that, Sean, we're going to have this gnarly effort to start where you're pushing 6 watts per kilo, 5.5 watts per kilo, and then they're going to settle in for 45 seconds and go up Box Hill.
Yeah, the way this course is laid out is, and the way Zwift racing is the first 3-5 minutes is going to be full gas, get into position, try to relax and recover before we hit the hill. And we see a lot of power ups going off now, some ghost power ups. You saw somebody trying to make a little move up the front, maybe stretch it out a little more.
Yeah.
And the power is definitely up, 6.4 watts per kilogram on the front for Gordon Benson.
That's crazy. And so this course, these races are it's going to be around 30 minutes. So you might think, often these types of races are, there's an equalizer, right? You're like, who's going to do better, the ITU athletes or the Ironman athletes? And I actually think, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, because I know that you will, but I think, these powerhouse Ironman athletes and 70.3 athletes, I think maybe have a little bit of a better shot to beat maybe an athlete like the Brownlees in a Canute that's on the screen that's more focused on short course, because it's just so much strength dependent to be able to time trial like this, go really hard to start, and then it's going to feel like you're getting hit in the legs with a hammer when you go up this climb. Do you think the fact that we have two hard climbs with really no rest suits kind of those longer distance? Obviously they have to have the power to be able to. You think it suits kind of those strong longer distance athletes?
Yeah, I think this course will suit the long course athletes pretty well because of the steady flat sections on it. But I would never bet against Alistair Brownlee. He's one of the top, probably arguably the best triathlete ever to race. Definitely ITU, but I would say even branch that out over to full distance. Yeah. Sorry, not Ironman, but just triathlon in general. He's one never to bet against, especially on the bike portion. He's so strong, and I think this race is going to suit him really well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. As these athletes, a little kicker going to sting the tiny fractures in that group in the front at about 10 riders in of a gap there. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Brownlee's certainly going to be hard to beat. I'll let you take that as your pick. I won't hold you to it yet, but we'll wait till it's easier for us to make sure we wins the pick. But you think you've got athletes like Boris Stein in there, Boscher was in there. Those athletes obviously great over longer distance, but they are powerhouses on the bike, and they're certainly going to struggle at the very, very high output power sections here early. But I think that second time up Box Hill isn't going to be any slower than the first time. Those really strong athletes right now, Johnny Brownlee, the other Brownlee brother that's in the race today, kind of almost a hometown course for those two today.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but he's moved up nicely here to get towards the front. It looked like there were some gaps starting to open when he was towards the back of that pack and moved towards the front. So nicely positioning himself. We've got the hill, first time up Box Hill coming up in about another mile roughly. So
yeah.
You should see some of the athletes that really want to take advantage of the hill try to move towards the front and get in good position as the hill begins here.
Yeah, and those that are terrified of the hill are sure they're in good enough position. You are at the front of the group, the further you can kind of fall back as the group hammers up this climb. So you might see athletes doing that here, and I believe right now we've got a shot of what looks like the chase group that's not too far behind on this bridge. They're definitely on the same bridge there, so you can see that there's definitely some effort going in to kind of bridge those two groups together as we look at Sanders not leading, but in the front of that front group pushing that pace.
Yes, Lionel's up there, Johnny's up there. I don't see Alistair in the top 10. Some other strong riders. Guajados is there from France. Definitely a mix of names that you might not expect to see at this point. So it's a big group going down the tube and going to start the hill together. Yeah,
and you've got McIntosh in there. Name I saw earlier was Nathan Killam. He's a triathlete that's had some good success, not like some of these, but he's had a bunch of success racing during doing Zwift racing. He does that a bunch in his during his season. So he's one with a lot of experience. So you might see that name near the top 10 when we get near the end of the race here. But kind of final little moments before they head up Box Hill. Who's going to put in the effort that blows this group apart? Is it going to be Sanders?
We'll see. I saw Ali moved up. Both Brownleys are towards the front. Buckingham's up there. And we're going to go around this roundabout, take a little left here. And when you see the red flashing lines on the ground is when the Box Hill KOM officially starts. So there it is. We're officially on the hill, and you see the watts immediately go up.
That when you see the red, what does that mean when the watts turn red? Is that a certain watts per kilo they have?
Yeah, it's a certain amount of watts. The riders are over their watts per kilo, so it just signifies a really hard effort, and usually it's in that 8-9% range, or watts per kilo range. So it definitely signifies really, really high power, and you usually see it either at the beginning of a climb, which we saw there, or sprint finish, and you see Johnny Brownlee going to 8 watts per kilogram to move up here to try to stay connected.
Yeah, no, they're definitely burning some matches to make sure they stay in that women's race. If you weren't near the front of that group and a little gap opens, that's kind of it. And that ended up with, the 2 women were able to make it a race of 2. So you got to make sure you're being attentive. Right now, Johnny Brown at the front of the group, I haven't seen him fall underneath 6.5 watts per kilo since this climb started. So no doubt he's putting an effort in right now, 7.5 watts per kilo. Some people talk about, there's rumors about some team tactics maybe going on here today. If we ever were going to see team tactics, would we see it with the Brownleys? Would you be able to maybe say like, hey, Johnny, this week you work for me. If you're Alistair and you say, just go to the front and absolutely drill it and see if we can get rid of half of this field. Do you think there's a possibility for that?
Possibly. I don't know, though. The only time I've really seen Ali and Johnny work together is on the bike, so I think at a race like today would probably be the scenario. And the only other time I saw Ali really help Johnny was the Cozumel race when Johnny was in a real bad spot with the heat, and Ali literally had to carry his brother across the finish line to the finish of that race. So we've got names continuing to go up the front. Johnny's now slipped back to 3rd. Van Riel is up there. Ali's up there. Sanders are up there. All the guys we expect to be up there, especially on this climb, are right in the middle of that pack and hanging tough right now.
Yeah, but it's spreading out though. I think there's definitely some athletes, as they'd say, kind of, and at any moment could split this race in a couple different groups. But right now there's 10 athletes within 3 seconds of the man on screen, Laidlow. So he's certainly pushing a consistent effort now, just still right over 7 watts per kilo, with Johnny Brownlee hitting a 7.8 to try to bridge up to him. So they're riding 1 and 2, and maybe looking for that same scenario that we had from our women's race, 2 athletes off the front.
Yeah, like at this point, if one or 2 athletes are off the front with the names back through 3 through 10, I think it's fine if they got a couple seconds. But
yeah,
you don't want to see 4, 5, or 6 athletes go off the front together, especially over the top. So these athletes back down around 10th and 9th, Martin Van Riel with 2 seconds back. Want to tighten that up a little bit, especially as we get closer here towards the summit of this climb.
Now, Sean, as someone I know who's ridden this climb, knows that Zwift, do you think there's an opportunity here for like a counterattack? Like if you're Lionel Sanders and you're in this front group with no gap to Johnny Brownlee and any of these other super talented athletes, is there a spot to try to go it alone on that little kicker maybe, or is it there's no way you're getting away?
Yeah, the interesting thing on this is if when you do come to the summit of this climb and you go under the banner, it does flatten out for a bit, but then there is another 100-meter steep kicker right before you start descending. So if you wanted to get away, that's a great place to do it. People, like the riders, may have raced up to the top of the banner and not realized there's another little kicker before you start descending. That's either a great place to try to catch back up, and again, you see them using power-ups here. Once they cross that KOM banner, they will get another power-up. So if you've gotten dropped slightly and you get a good power up, a featherweight or an arrow helmet, there is a little bit of road where it flattens out, and you can use your power up to try to get back to somebody who's made a breakaway. And then the kicker to really get over the top, if you're aware of it, is another place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all good tactics, and these athletes have enough energy in their legs. Those tactics going over the top as they're coming here. You're pretty close to the end of this first time of the climb. Don't forget they've got to do again, but you've got Sanders in there, you've got Kostas in there, super strong cyclist. Martin Van Riel is now off the back of this group by just about 5 seconds.
But it's interesting to see here. Gordon Benson trains with the Brownlees, and looks like he's off the front by 8 seconds. We could see a little bit of tactics here with the British athletes, both Brownlees and Benson, really pushing off the front here.
Yeah, it looks like, you're right. They're a little bring him back, but right now it's Kostas over the group over the front of that climb and in first of that group, pushing the pace with Laidlow and Moreno in there as well. But I think now is where we're going to see, if we're going to see these athletes try to get a big gap or blow this group up, it's going to be maybe a Sanders or a Brownlee up over this little kicker.
Yeah, and we got a good gap from the front 8. Both Brownlees are up there. Jimmy Kershaw from last week's winner is up there. Sanders is in there. Kostas is in there. So, the podium from last week is all still here, and the gap is definitely opening back to Benson at 9 seconds, 10 seconds, and 24 back to Van der Struijs in 10th.
Yeah, and then we see Laidlow use his burrito as he goes through this flat section. Get away from Kostas and Mullen and Sanders, all two back, the biggest gap between those. So it's definitely spread out here. We've got Kershaw, Canedo, Benson all chasing on, and that's going to be kind of what decides this are those athletes, that chase group, going to be able to come up to this group of what looks like it's probably going to settle to this group is probably going to settle to around 8 athletes when it's all said and done. But we'll see.
Yeah, and you see how quickly those gaps have opened, back to 30 seconds, 50 seconds. Again, those gaps in Zwift can be really deadly. We saw in the women's race that it was impossible for them to close 40-second gap, 50-second gap. This is a much bigger race on the men's side. We've got 133 athletes, so we could see a big chase pack at a minute to minute and a half down by the bottom of this hill, and we'll see if they can pull any time back before the next climb.
Yeah, and if it's a big enough chase back, with a field, it looks like started the race, it's possible it would be a massive chase group. And if it's that big and there's people actually working, you might be able to bring that gap back. Probably not close enough where you're going to be able to jump across front to win the race, but definitely, pick up, kind of the pack fodder in this front group that might get blown early on Box Hill. Because again, kind of what we were talking about, the races in Zwift is kind of as long as you can stay in that group. So there's certainly a chance for some of these athletes in this group of 8 to blow up pretty hard going up Box Hill for the second time and kind of leave the door open for the second group. But right now it's 1 minute and 20 seconds to that second group. So we have a pretty secure front group at this moment with Johnny Brownlee, Kostas, Sanders, Alistair Brownlee, Canedo, Laidlow, Mullen, and Kershaw. So these are athletes that know how to play Zwift. They know how to get up and over climbs. And now I think there's going to be some athletes hoping they can settle in at some point and save some energy for the second time up this climb.
Yeah, and you saw it on the downhill and the descent. The front group was still riding at about 4.5, 5.5 watts per kilogram downhill, while we saw some of the second pack freewheeling down the hill and not really putting the power down. That front group is really working hard to try to open up this gap as much as possible before we hit this next flat section and a whole new round of power-ups come into play. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm a little surprised. I would someone like Sanders to try to kind of hit these athletes when they're get a little gap. Maybe he's got a little bit more confidence in his climb, but man, if I was Sanders, Sanders clearly has the ability to be up there and to beat anybody shoulder to shoulder. But if I was racing the Brownlee brothers, gap going into this climb as we move to what looks to be the chase group.
Yeah, this might even be a third chase group with Ben Canute here. Yeah, you see how blown apart the pack is just from that first climb, and it's going to continue to extend with these small groups unless they work really, really well together.
No, absolutely. They've got to, you have to sacrifice. You've got to that the athletes you're with and push the effort in. If you're trying to save effort in one of these chase groups, there's no chance any of this gap is going to come back at all. No doubt Ben Canute has settled in a little bit. He's just at 4 watts per kilo, so he's just in this chase group, kind of seeing what happens, what develops, maybe waiting for a larger group to come up or to kind of see how things develop. As we get back to the leaders, Costas takes his turn at the back, getting some a little bit of rest as we cruise through the latter sections of the course.
Yeah, and we saw how frustrated Lionel was last week with coming third in the race. We'll see if he can kind of change his fortune today. It's a climb that suits him. 6-7 minutes of really high power. If anybody can hammer away up the next climb of Box Hill, it's Lionel. But he's got some big names sitting right with him in the Brownlees and Kershaw and Costas, all the guys that were up there last week. So it's going to be a really, really exciting and high-powered climb next time we hit Box Hill.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of horsepower in that group. Horsepower that, as you said, Lionel is familiar with. Costas and Kershaw last week being able to get in front of him and what he said was an ill-timed sprint. He's not going to make that same mistake again today, although it's a different, not sure that mistake could necessarily be made, or I don't think it's going to be quite as close of a podium all within a second this week. But right now we see Sanders moving to the front with Laidlow behind him. And we have Mullen, Brownlee, and Kershaw all pushing the pace. So, yeah, we have those powerhouses that he knows. But then you've got these other names in here that maybe he wasn't expecting, a Canedo or a Laidlow or Moreno, right? So I think there's a lot of looking over your shoulder, size up who he thinks or who we think are going to be the athletes that are pushing that effort up Box Hill. But I'm pretty sure we're going to see the Brownlees attack that early section of Box Hill.
Yeah, and I think now is a good point to look to see where they're riding. Both Lionel and the Brownlees are trying to use the draft, stay behind, not use any of their power at this point on the flat section. They can kind of write off the second pack to some degree. They're over a minute back. Martin Van Riel and Funk down at 1 minute and 7 seconds back. So, yeah, you'll see guys saving their legs here because they know it's all going to come down to Box Hill, and it's not that far away.
No, not at all. And, there's athletes, their cards to play, so to speak, but also saving those power-ups, right? Like, we could have some athletes that are stoked on the power-up they have and some athletes that aren't necessarily. Maybe this is obvious, Sean, but you're the pro at all things power up. What's the power up that you would?
You'd want to be holding the featherweight power up here. We saw Lucy Charles use the arrow power up right at the top. Yeah. I think this climb is going to come down to who's just going to sustain the best 6-minute power up the climb. I don't think it'll be a sprint finish. I think it's going to be similar to what we saw in the women's race, where there's going to be gaps, mostly based on just how hard you go on that climb. So I prefer the featherweight here going into Box Hill for the second time.
I think you're right. Featherweight would be certainly what I'd want, but I probably wouldn't want to be in this that the 8 athletes are in, having to try to beat Lionel Sanders and the Brownlee brothers.
If I was sitting in this pack right now, I'd want unlimited double draft going on just so I could hang until the bottom of Box Hill, because I know once we got to the hill that power is just the power these guys put out and the watts per kilogram they'll hold for that 6 minutes something I can only dream of. So let's see. It looks like we've got somebody off the front a little bit. Who
Yeah,
is that? Is it Canedo?
yeah, I didn't see a power up being used to get that.
He's just
And
using 6 watts per kilogram to go off the front there.
yeah, I guess that's what, I think this is what it would be now. You saw right now you see Costas at 3.7 watts per kilo. I saw both the Brownlees just at about 4 or just under 4 watts per kilo. So most days that wouldn't be recovery watts, but on a 30-minute race with 2 times that Box Hill, that counts as recovery watts here today. But Canada, a 3-second gap as these athletes are kind of looking at each other.
Yeah, and I mean he's driving this pace really hard on the flat section. We got a little bit of a hill. I mean the 5% grade here for a very short period of time, and then it'll flatten out all the way to Box Hill. Maybe he wants to just make this race harder from a longer way out and not have it come down to the last 6 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's certainly making it hard. You know, putting out that there's only a certain amount of matches you have, John. For those that don't know, kind of you've got a match book of efforts that you can use in a bike race, and the matches run out at a certain point. And it would seem that having burned those matches in the flat section at 6 watts per kilo, it's going to be pretty hard to have more matches left by the time you get to Box Hill.
Yeah, it's really surprising. We've got Alistair Brownlee 40 seconds off the back of this pack. So somewhere along the flat section, he got popped from this group and is now riding 47 seconds behind his brother Johnny.
Yeah, no, didn't expect to see that. That happened quickly enough. Sorry, that neither of us kind of noticed it as it was happening. But you know, about to get swept up by kind of that chase group with Killam, Funk. I think Kanama was in there as well, about a minute and 15 seconds back. And I think he knows at this point, so he's kind of letting himself go back to that group. So now we have a group of 7 with Laidlow, Brownlee, Costas, Sanders, Kershaw, Moreno, Molin, and there's one I missed, maybe Costas in there as well as Canedo. So 7 athletes at the front of this group, front of this race, working well as a group, now settling in at about per kilo, knowing they've got Box Hill still to go.
Yeah, and that's surprising from Ali. I wonder if there was some technical issues he had. That makes both of my picks for today out the window. Ali's gone, and I messed it up on Emma Collins. So, Matt, who do you have winning today?
I don't know. I'll tell you with the 100 meters in the race today, but I mean, I certainly wouldn't bet against Lionel Sanders, athlete that is very familiar with riding on Zwift and racing. He's done some races against some pro cyclists and had some impressive results. And more than anything, obviously he's a very, very strong rider, but Lionel hates to lose, and he's a smart athlete, and he'll go back and he will pick apart every meter of this course here today to make sure he gives himself the best tactical race that he can. And then it's just whether or not his legs are going to be able to, kind of speak up for him at the end of this event. But I'm going to go with Lionel Sanders right now, just cruising softly, soft pedaling at 413.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. He's had a week to kind of rage ride on Zwift, and I'm sure he's looking to get some revenge here on Jimmy Kershaw and Costas, who nipped him at the line last week.
Yes, one to hold a grudge, certainly when it comes to a event. So he definitely doesn't want to get those 2 athletes here today. And I will say, having them motivates him to make sure he doesn't any of those tactics and kind of sticks to his plan. And I know Lionel pulls a couple different plans going into this final.
Here we go. He's moved up nicely. He's sitting right up on the wheel, and the climb is just about to get underway. Right around this little roundabout, and we're climb. We'll see if anyone uses their power-ups early, or if people will save them and try to use them over the top of this climb, or if they get into trouble midway and need to use their power-up too soon. So here we go. Climb is officially on.
There they go. Yep, they're up over the kind of of Box Hill. They're looking at each.
Yeah, you see the little 0, 1%, and now it quickly goes up to 7%, 8% for the first start. It's got a little bit of a punchy kick to it at the beginning, and will settle into around 5% through the middle part of this climb. And like we said earlier, it flattens out over the top. So it is advantageous to have a aero helmet right on the top, but early on it's 7, 8%. It's not going to do a lot right now.
No, aero helmet certainly isn't going to help much. 7%. Right now, these athletes are kind of on what their legs are going to. And then, as you said, strategically try to use whatever power up they have at the right time. And you might go into this planning to use it on that last section that you talk about, but you see a gap open or you see yourself getting dropped off the back, and you just got to use it when you need it. But right now, it looks like Laidlow is getting a little bit of a gap, kind of immeasurable to a certain extent time-wise, but it did look like he had a meter or two there at the front of the group. But they bring it back. Costa's, now we can see with all his info on screen, hitting 430 watts at 6.5 watts per kilo going up this climb. But it's Laidlow, Canedo, and Costa seem to be pushing the pace. But as we learned from our women's race last week and a bunch of other races, sometimes it's the athlete that is hiding, that isn't showing their cards, that you kind of see at the last minute. So I wonder who that might be today.
Yeah, in the women's race, we saw Emma Palin take the early part of this climb really aggressive, and then it was Lucy who came over the top to get the win at the end. Looks like this group is all pretty close together. We don't see anyone dangling off yet, so a lot of racing still left here, and everyone's still looking pretty solid.
Yeah, absolutely. The group is up. One's all within the same second. Moreno Mullen pushing the pace at the front. We've got someone using a drafting power up as he kind of cruises through, gets that draft and goes right by. That's Laidlow putting in a hard effort there. Tell us about that.
And on this, I mean, really that power up was meaningless. Uphill on a 5, 6%, 7% rate, the draft power up is pretty pointless. Where here we go, we see who is that? Alberto Mullins. Is that who we're on right now? Who's using the featherweight? No, someone behind him is using the featherweight. Looks like Costas potentially to try to move up towards the front of this race is using his featherweight early, trying to get himself into position for the final 1.5K of this race.
Yeah, I mean, I think to you, would that show us?
I think he's using it to get in position.
Yeah.
You would like to see him maybe save it a little longer and try to kick over the top on the last steep part. But really, at this point, you just if you need to stay up there and that's all you got, you better use it before getting dropped and try to hold a good position. It looks like Lionel is in great position right now, and Laidlow still making a big move here up front.
Yeah, it certainly is. But for me, what I'm playing it cool and waiting till they know it's time to go, right? They're kind of hiding a little bit, and I think maybe they're but I think Sanders and Brownlee are in a great position, even though they've got a slight gap behind Laidlow and Moreno Mullen, and that's with 1K to go.
And we're really starting to see some gaps open up here. Kershaw off the back, 4 seconds. Johnny Brownlee, 2 seconds. Costas, 2 seconds. And then Lionel sitting right at 1 second back. You can see him. You can see Laidlow and Moreno up there trying to make a move here. He's trying to stay in it. I think Lionel can, if he can hang right to the end where it flattens out a bit, I'd like to see him put down some big power in the last 100, 150 meters.
Yeah, that gap, I think you're right. And I would normally, seems like right now, Moreno and Laidlow are putting that gap 3 seconds now to Sanders, Costas, Brownlee as well. Kershaw's off the back of that group.
8 watts per kilogram on the front for Laidlow. Really trying to seal it here with a big push. Everybody else, 3-6 second gap now. He might ride off the front with this. Mullen is trying to catch him, but Laidlow still keeps pushing big power off the front. 9.7 watts per kilogram.
Yeah, he's definitely laying it all out there. The numbers are ridiculous. 9.5 watts per kilo, 6.5 now, 6-second gap on Moreno Molin. And then it's 4 seconds further back to Sanders. You're going to see Sanders putting in his effort near the end here, but 465, 475 watts now from Molin as he chases Kershaw with a 7-second gap going into the final.
Yeah, it looks like Laidlow over the top, Molin in second, and Costas coming in third. Is that how it played out? Sanders fifth?
I think it is. I think you had right ahead of Sanders, and that's 2 weeks in a row. Lionel's not going to like getting beat by him twice in a row, but Costas is a phenomenal cyclist. We often see him off the front of races, so no huge surprise to see him have that power. Brownlee looks like he came across in about 6th place, but Laidlow with the big win over Moreno Molin. See that coming, Sean.
Again, some new names, people we didn't talk about, and it's great to see how a course really shakes up the results in these Zwift races.
No, it certainly does, and again, I think these athletes all had different game plans going in the race, but often that game plan is kind of as soon as the stronger athlete puts in an effort and separates the field. And no doubt they separated the field going up Box Hill for the first time. We knew it was going to be a hard one. I didn't necessarily expect Sean to see in both of our races things break up maybe as much as they did at Box Hill the first time, but I guess that's maybe just an example of me being wrong.
Yeah, you definitely see those gaps, those 5, 6 athletes, 7 athletes that can get a little bit of a gap over the top of a hill, can extend it on the descent and then across the flat. So it looks like we got the results coming up here, and it is Laidlow who took the W, 5 seconds ahead of Mullins and another 6 seconds ahead of Costas. So international field here for the win, but 3 Brits in the top 10 and Canadian rounding out the 10th spot in a minute 15 back. Martin Van Riel up to 9th.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happened to Brownlee there, kind of in the middle of that second lap in the flats. Didn't expect to see, and I'm sure he wouldn't have expected to see that. And you could see his watts, 6 watts per kilo. He definitely had the watts to be up there. Sorry, that was his brother Johnny in 6th place, but good rides by both of those athletes, but didn't quite get up there. But Sam Laidlow with the big win over Mullins and Costas, names that we might not necessarily recognize certainly wouldn't recognize to be able to be in front of the Brownlees and Sanders. But Zwift racing, as we said, is different. It's a different beast, and those athletes have shown, in drafting and non-drafting racing that they have good cycling power, and they certainly showed that they have the ability to race well on Zwift here today.
Yeah, and it's very rare any triathlon finishes on a climb. So I guess we can expect some different names when we never see these triathlon races finish this way. So really cool to see, and we know how strong the French athletes are. Growing up, coming up through the French Grand Prix races, they have a ton of hard courses down there in France, and shows here with Costas and Laidlow going in the top 3.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great call. And again, this Z is meant to be a fun race for these athletes to kind of get back together and rub shoulders with their competitors and maybe put them in a fair bit of pain as well. And I appreciate y'all tuning in. Sean Jefferson, thanks so much for being with me again this week. And we'll have another great event next week.
Yeah, looking forward to next week's race and seeing all these athletes back at it again.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And as we what's going to happen, although right now it's up there every week, so we'll see if she can do it again next week, is along with the men's field as well. Going to have some great athletes out here again for our 3rd installment of the Z Pro Tri Series. Again, for Sean Jefferson, I'm Matt Lieto. Right on.